A little bit about our speaker this evening that I wanted to just share with you, Dave McClow. Dave McClow is a clinical associate for the Pastoral Solutions Institute and author of Catholic Exchange, Pathos, and Today's Catholic. He writes about a Catholic vision of masculinity, which is summarized in the Abba Prayer for Men. He is a national speaker who talks to men's groups, universities, high school students, and professional organizations. He's also very active in his diocese men's group, Rekindle the Fire, and has founded multiple text ministries for men. For over 30 years, he has been helping individuals, couples, and teams change in a variety of settings, from inpatient psychiatric and addictions, employee assistance, outpatient community mental health, and statewide technical assistance centers. His counseling specialties are depression, anxiety, trauma, and the building of practical skills to cope with overwhelming emotions. He has been a national consultant and trainer for a number of evidence-based practices and topics. He's also started a number of small businesses. He's trained as a pastoral counsel. He has always recognized God as the source of healing and integrated his faith into his counseling practices. Beyond that, he's also a good friend and a committee member of our St. Vincent Sees the Faith Committee that is helping to sponsor this event. So please help me give a warm welcome to Dave McClow.
Thanks. For how many of you does same-sex attraction get personal, where it's yourself or your friends or your family? Show of hands. Okay, just a few of you, okay? How many of you struggle with having conversations where you're going between cheerleading, the lifestyle, just arguing, or saying nothing? Yeah. Okay. And how many of you had something much better to do tonight? I always got one, right? No. So what makes this topic so difficult to talk about? It's emotional, right? I mean, it raises the emotions very quickly, and it's hard to have a conversation that's calm. And so it could sound like this, you know, you're a sinner and you're going to hell, you know. Oh yeah? Well, you're a homophobe, gay-bashing, bigoted, hate-spewing religious freak. Now, maybe you haven't engaged in those extremes, but it's out there. So how's that for tolerance and compassion? It doesn't work. So what we're going to do tonight is try to navigate these troubled waters and walk you through some psychology, a little philosophy, theology, and give you some practical details. Now, yeah, I can see the blank looks on your faces. Okay, so here's the translation. The simplest way I can say this is, I will challenge you to use your head, your heart, and your hands to love better. Okay? That'll be the bottom line. We'll teach you how to stay calmer and manage your feelings better. We'll teach you a little bit about how to know certain things in relationships. And that'll be the psychology. This will apply to all the relationships. The culture has peddled a series of divorces that split apart too many pieces of our lives. And the theology wants to marry them. The Catholic Church would say, let's bring them back together. So, and then finally, we'll get to some practical skills too. So we've got the knowledge, the feelings, and the skills. And we're called to love so you can have this good conversation. All right, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about what perspectives I'm coming from. I'll give you 3 pieces of it. First is my brother Mark. He died. Some of you have already read the article. He died at 55 of throat cancer. He was a rehabber of houses. He took ugly things and he made them beautiful. He was also same-sex attracted. He had wounds, deep wounds, that the way he remembered things, it kept him wide open. He couldn't let go of them. he cut himself off from me and our family for 20 years. And then when he called 2.5 weeks before he died to let me know that he had stage 4 cancer and he was going to go into hospice. So this started a whirlwind of reconnecting, of revelations of extremely painful memories about me and my family, and then I was also taking care of him while he was dying. So it's not an understatement to say it was the most excruciating time of my life. I mean, I was strung up on the cross. But it was also the most exhilarating. You know, one day we're talking about a memory, his memory of when we tipped over in a sailboat. If you know anything about it was a little sailboat on Lake Michigan. The wind gust knocked us over, and then the sail went turtle, so it was down. We couldn't get it back up. And so he was in the water. I was a swimmer. I was an athlete. I could get up on top of the boat. And he was kind of bobbing up and down. He wasn't going under and staying under, but I was a lifeguard, and I knew that if I jumped in the water that, you know, we could both drown. So it wasn't going to do me any good to do that. Well, his perspective was I wanted him dead. Yeah. And he got mad, you know. He basically said, "You SOB, if you're going to sit up there, I'm going to reach up there and pull you in the water." So what does he do? He reaches up and grabs my leg. I'm holding on to the tiller. He pulls himself up. I think, great, mission accomplished, right? He's out of the water. No, he thinks, you know, I tried to kill him. And so for 40 years, he came out of that and said, we never talked about it. He said, "Oh, I thought it was our little secret." And I was like, oh my gosh, you know, Mark, I never felt like killing you. My other brother, I could have taken him out a couple times, right? You know, I mean, you just get really mad. So, but he hung on to this thing for 40 years. So, did I say this was excruciating? I mean, think of yourself as somebody just accused you of attempted murder. So those weren't the only things. So the exhilarating part was facing death with my Heavenly Father right by my side. I felt like I was surrounded by my friends in heaven. I prayed for him a lot. I held his hand. I held his head. I put my hand on his chest, and I imagined God's love going right into his heart, and he would calm down, whether he was awake or he was unconscious. He would calm down. So I loved him to the end. So we laughed, we reminisced. I prayed, I sobbed. You know, the waves of grief roll in and then let them roll out. I'm not sure when I felt more alive. So, and it was an initiation for me. It was truly initiation. So, after the doctor said he could die anytime, I asked God for a favor, a sign of his mercy, to let him die during the 3 o'clock hour. So, that was on a Friday. He held on till Monday, and his last breath was at 3 o'clock. So he granted me that favor. I had stepped out for lunch and came back, and he was on his last breath just before I came into the room. So now, because God is a good father, and he has a sense of humor, and he likes to surprise his children once in a while, I picked up his iPod. Music's a big thing. Certain times in my life, you pick up a song, boom, it's there. So I pick up his iPod, I push play. I didn't have to look for it. I thought I'd be searching for it. I push play, and it comes up, Queen Latifah's "Mercy, Mercy, Mercy." And she sings that, "Lord, have mercy on me." So I think I got him covered. The Father took care of him, gave me a gift. Queen Latifah and her mercy got him from the bottom. And I think he stepped into the Father's arms and love. So the Holy Spirit, you know, was in this totally. It was a time completely filled with truth, goodness, and beauty, along with horrific and painful memories and conversation, ugliness. So he was a rehabber. He could turn the most ugly things into beautiful things. He wasn't a Catholic, but he was united to God, I think, in his rehabbing, making ugly things beautiful. That's what God does. He creates order out of chaos for all of us, right? And Father Dan suggested that, I think Mark is going to work with you rehabbing hearts, because I'm a counselor. So I tell you this story to let you know I'm not a passive bystander in this conversation. I am a Catholic convert. I love the church. I became Catholic because I thought it had the fullness of the church, the truth in it. So I'm not a gay basher. And some people would see this as it. So as a pastoral counselor, as the bio said, I've been working on this Catholic vision of masculinity. There's a prayer out there. Some of you've got it. It's a summary. I'm not an expert on treating same-sex attraction disorder. I've only had maybe 5 or 10 people over my career. And usually we're working on trauma. I was not trying to do reparative therapy. I worked with more family members. But what I do bring to this is my expertise on a relational approach to evangelism and talking about these tough issues. Almost everything we do will be through this lens. There's a great quote from Josh McDowell: rules without relationship equals rebellion. Rules without relationship equals rebellion. So this is the problem, I think the majority problem around same-sex attraction is people see the rules, they don't see the relationship with God. And in fact, I think it's the problem why most people leave the church. Either they're all relationship and, the Catholic Church has too many rules, or the Catholic Church just has too many rules. I can't stand it. And they don't have a relationship with God. So some of you were here, some of you were in this picture at Trent Horn's talk last weekend. He uses a very Socratic method. What does that mean? He asks a lot of questions, and it's very relational. So he gets people to listen and answer questions. So one of his main points is you don't need to know everything. You need 3 questions and 1 statement, okay? 3 questions, 1 statement. Anybody remember what the question was? One of them? Why? What do you think? Why do you think that? And how do you know that's true? Or how did you arrive at this position? And then the lifesaver is the statement. I don't know. But let me find out a good answer for you. So that covers your apologetics here. 3 questions, 1 statement. You don't need to know everything. So I went to Bishop Dwanger, Bobby Lauer's class. I walked in with this ball. And I said, what is it? And they said, well, Dave, it's a ball. Well, what can you tell me about it? Well, it's blue and it's round. I said, look, this ball is going to teach you about the deep mysteries of life, of relationships, of marriage, and the Trinity. Why not go big, right? So then I took the ball, and we're just going to throw it back and forth, just easy. Let's see if I can do this one-handed. Very good. And then And I said, all right, what'd you learn? What'd you learn about the Trinity? It's relational. There's give and take. Anybody else? You can sit down for now. It's the giving and the receiving, right? It's the give and take. It's the extending and receiving. And this is what I call the infinite liturgy. So I drew this up on the board, one piece at a time. So the Father gives himself totally to the Son. The Son receives that and gives himself totally back to the Father. And that's the infinity symbol. And of course, when in the marital act, when there is that giving and receiving, then there's new life. What form? Two forms. Come on. Huh? Children, babies. And bonding, right? It feels good. It brings you closer together. So it brings new life. So the same thing happens in the Trinity. So I call this the infinite liturgy. And liturgy is a ritual and a routine that communicates love and creates communion. Now, I don't know if it's out there. I just come up with it, so I don't know. I probably stole it from somewhere. But it's a ritual and a routine that communicates love and creates communion, brings it together. So then I took it into a relationship. I was talking about marriage at Dwanger, but in the relationship, the same thing happens, right? On a psychological level, somebody says hello, somebody says hello back. The ball goes back and forth. There's new life. You ever had somebody not say hello? Mm-hmm. Oh, it's a death, right? I mean, it hurts because the extending and receiving isn't there. So all of relationships are embedded in this primordial liturgy. It's from the beginning. And every interaction that you have with a person that goes well, and we'll talk about how it's not go so well, is a reflection of the Trinity. Okay, so that's a spirituality that families can pull off. It's very hard to go monastic and spend 4 hours of prayer every day with a family going on, right? So I think it's a basis for some spirituality. I want to move into mindsets. And when the ball goes back and forth, it calms the brain down. And when it doesn't, it sets it on fire. So there's 3 parts of the brain. Now everybody has their hand model, so I want you to get it out. And you put your thumb across your palm and bring your fingers down. Now, I'll have to do this like this. This part here, underneath, is your brain stem. In it is your ability, it's your fight, flight, and freeze response. So it's your fear response. That's your fear brain. And when you're there, other people look like they're the enemy. And in varying degrees, right? You know, from let's take him out, like my brother, to, I'm going to take him out verbally, or I'm just going to get out of here. So that's the brain stem. Now, some people say that's the reptilian part of your brain. If you lift your fingers up, your thumb is your limbic system. That's the middle part of your brain. And in the limbic system, there are 2 things. There's lots of things. I'm really oversimplifying. So it's your feelings, your emotions, and the bonding centers. So this is where you feel communion. This is where you feel close. Some people say this is the mammalian part of our brain. So I know we got dog lovers over here. This is why your dog, and when they come home, wags his tail, happy to see you, because they're bonded to you. You have a pet crocodile, and he could care less, right? Unless he's hungry and sees lunch. So that's the middle part of the brain. So then you have your cortex, and your cortex up in front is your prefrontal cortex, and we're going to talk about 3 things there. It has your intellect, that's your ability to reason, and see solutions. It has your conscience, which is your ability to see consequences, and it has empathy, which is your ability to see someone else's perspective. So if your fingers are down, you're in a mindset that we call the adult self. If your fingers are up and you're in your fear brain, you're flipping your lid. You're losing your mind. You're going crazy. So this is what we have to get control of to have these conversations. So when you're in your adult self, you can have, when your fingers are down, you can have your feelings fully. I mean, that's what was happening with my brother. You know, I mean, ouch, he was hurting me, but I was letting the waves come, and I was able to stay in there and hang in there with him because I could stay more in my adult self. It doesn't mean I was happy. It wasn't happy camp, but I was able to hang in there. When you're in your adult self, you can see solutions. When you're in your child self, you only focus on the problems and those feelings of powerlessness. Okay, does that make some sense? All right, so what's the movement of love? Is it out toward people or in toward yourself? Out. Okay, so that's the ball going out. That's always reaching out. So we are called to stay in your adult self. You have your head, your intellect, and your heart. The heart is the emotions, and then you're called to act and to love. I call the adult self the physiology of virtue. You cannot be virtuous without your prefrontal cortex. It's not possible. People are too much the enemy when you flipped your lid. You won't take their perspective. You'll attack them. You'll fight them. You'll flee from them, or you'll freeze. Now, what's the movement of fear? Out or in? In. So fear gets a hold of you, and you don't go outside of yourself. It curves you back in on yourself. So that's what fear does. Now, St. Augustine would say that sin curves you back in on yourself. So fear and sin are really tightly related. Not that fear is sin, but fear always, in a certain level of it, leads to sin. So let's talk about the child selves. So there's 4 responses to fear. It's fight, flight, or freeze, and then face it. The adult self is here. The rest of these are child selves. So with the fight, it's a tantrum. We call it a tantrum in our counseling practice. And the tantrumers looks like they're the most powerful of the 3, but the tantrumer is most powerless because they're out of control of their situation. That's what they're feeling out of control of. What else is a tantrumer out of control of? Emotions. Yeah, their emotions themselves, exactly. So you can do a classic tantrum, throw yourself on the floor, or you can go to the defensive side where you have your inner lawyer come out and come up with a PowerPoint presentation on 5 bullet points on why you're stupid or wrong or why you're right. Okay, that's the tantrumer. Then there's pouting withdrawing. That's withdrawing from the relationship. You can do it mentally. Yeah, you're in the... It's Charlie Brown, remember, blah, 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 blah. He's gone. Or you can do it physically. Then the expert mode is the freeze mode. This one's a little looser connection. But the expert mode, you have a wonderful solution for the other person. What's the problem? They are not interested. So, the child self always has one statement, some version of this. If you would just change, I could be okay. So the expert says, if you would just take my sage advice, I could be okay and you could be okay. All right? Now, when you're in expert mode, it has nothing to do with the quality of your advice. It has everything to do with how it's going to be received. So I need Joe again. I need 2 hands. All right, so I want you to throw me the ball. And what child self am I doing now? Yep, getting out of there, pouting, withdrawing. All right, let's see. So if I was going to take the ball, and I'm not going to do this, if I get it and throw it really hard at people, I did this in the class, and one time I was doing this for a while, and then I went, whoo, and the front row went, whoa! So, but what is that one? Fight. And it's on the extending side, right? So this is verbally bad. Now I'm going to throw the ball to you again, and then I want you to throw it back. What's that one? Tantrum. And that's on extending or receiving side. It's coming at me. So it's I didn't receive it. Okay, so you got tantrums on both sides. So this time I want you to throw it at me, and then I want you to retrieve it, and then do it 3 times. So what's that? Freeze. That's the expert mode. Got an idea coming in? Not taking it. Okay? So evangelism and apologetics, I think, gets stuck in the expert mode. You know, you did training as a Protestant pastor and went through pastoral counseling, and the pastors that I hung around with were awful listeners. People would get out, 3 words, and then, they're on sermon number 455, right? And Catholic priests do a little better, because I think they get more philosophy and more life kind of things. We're not trying to stuff life into, a little box. So this is the expert mode, and we want to avoid these things. So what does perfect love do to fear? Drives it out, casts it out. Boom. So when you're afraid, the problem is always you need to be loved. Okay? So you have to experience it. All right. So we've got different roads to evangelize in: the head, the heart, and the hands. And you have truth, goodness, and beauty that go along with this. And then what you want to do is see if you can match with the person you're working with or talking to. So if they're in their head more and they like truth and they're more philosophy oriented, you talk philosophy. If you talk philosophy to someone who's all heart, not going to happen, won't help them. If somebody is into beauty, you want to appeal to that side of them. And that's, more of an emotional thing. So an experiential. And then if somebody's into goodness, you go here. So the whole goal of this is how you stay calmer. And what we want to do is give you knowledge so you know what to do. And then we want you to be able to handle your emotions differently so you don't get into your child self. And then you have to know what to do. There's skills involved. So our faith, I think, as I get older, I get simpler. So this is the nub of the faith, the whole thing. You get loved, and then you get challenged. And it's in that order. You become a beloved son or daughter through baptism, and then you're called to love, fully. So now some people will get distorted. They'll go all head, and they focus on the rules alone, and they go with the challenge. And it doesn't work out well for the other side. It's criticism and condemnation for the other person. And you turn their heart, head, and hands off completely. You shut them down. So that's love without challenge. You ever try to swing on a swing that only has one side? Not for very long. You might do Tarzan on it, but... So then there's the all heart. And this is where our culture is. It's feeling based, it's more feminized, and you can't have a too many intellectual arguments with people because they're so emotional and it feels right, and if wrong did not feel right. And so you go here, and if you're going from here, it's all indulgence, it's all empathy. But it's not love, because you leave the person in a worse state. It condones what they're doing. So this would be like, the alcoholic or the smoker, hey, let me go out and buy you, 12 cases or, a whole carton of cigarettes, So it doesn't help them. So that's love and no challenge. And what we want to do is be integrated, your head, heart, and your hands. So you're going to have your head, the rules, you're going to have empathy, the heart, and then you're going to challenge the same-sex attracted person with chastity. We're all challenged to do that, to live a chaste life. Even if you're married, it doesn't mean you're not engaging in the marital act, but you're faithful to one. So we're all called to chastity, and then single people are called to celibacy. And that's the road to happiness. So that's the love and challenge. Now, it doesn't always go nice like that, right? Those conversations don't go well. Some of you may recognize this place. And it's a zoomed in level of the church. And when we get triggered, when we get flipped our lid, what we need to do is zoom out. Do you know where we are on this? Right there. So you need to zoom out. So there's content, that's the head, and there's feelings, that's the heart, and then there's a way to comment on the process. So you're kind of zoomed out one level, and this is very helpful to do in certain situations. It's impossible to do if you've what? Flipped your lid. Because the other person's the enemy. You're not thinking about, let's do a high level look at this. Let's shoot or get out. It might look like this. So if they're calling me names, you've got to bracket your feelings and thoughts, and then talk about an observation of what's going on in the relationship. So if you're calling me names, I might say, well, either you ran out of arguments or you don't have a good argument, because you're only calling me names. There's nothing in this. So that's kind of a process look. It doesn't say you're a jerk, and stop calling me names. It goes up and it comments on what's going on. Now on the feeling side, you might say, well, you seem to be getting frustrated with me. Do we need to take a break? Or, am I misunderstanding something? So that's another high level look. Now that's also one that has a lot of empathy in it, right? You're seeing what's going on and you're commenting on it and asking for a response. So staying calm is the goal here. And we're working on this relational approach. Now, do you remember the 3 questions? What do you think? Why do you think that way? And number 3, how do you know that's true? How did you arrive here? How did you make that decision? And then the lifesaver statement? I don't know. Let me find out. Dave knows. So I'll find somebody that will find me a good answer. All right. We've gone through the ball and we've gone back and forth with it. It represents the Trinity and every relationship we've been in. We've gone through the physiology of virtue that you need to have, and love and challenge, and that we need to challenge them to live our faith better. And then we've got this process look. So let's bring it all together. You're saying, somebody says, you're a homophobe. So what's happening with the ball? You're getting the volleyball launch at you, the 120-mile-an-hour launch at your face, right? So if you're not prepared for this, you're going to get caught off guard. But if you know it's coming, you can prepare for it. So what happens with the hand model? Well, where is the person saying this? Adult self, child self. Flipped his lid. Then head, heart, and hands, where are they talking from? Heart. Now, depending on what you're doing, you might be in the same condition, right? Heart, flip your lid. But you want to see if you can get your intellect back online. And you want to see if you can go to love, that they're a person, and then challenge them. You're looking at making the relationship more important than the problem. That is so helpful to have as a philosophy for any hard topic. My wife and I have to use this for the finance conversation. The relationship is more important than the problem. And we have different processing speeds. And I'm like, and she's like, wait, I need it here. And they're zooming out and observing the process, then the 3 questions, and then this is something I teach in every counseling session or every person I meet with, is you've got to take a break. If you flipped your lid, they flipped your lid, take a break. You need the brain to calm down. So that's very, very helpful. So with the homophobe, so what are the 3 questions you could ask? Why do you think that? Or what do you think about, what do you think would be a little weird? You're a homophobe. What do you think? Well, you're a homophobe. But you might ask, why do you think that way? Right? Right. So you may skip to question 2. And then how do you know that's true? And the person asking the questions is always the one in charge. So it shifts what you're doing. We have, from school, what's the answer to this question? Hands go up, and you feel like you have to answer. So you have to get over that reflex, So you get that, so, why do you think that way? Or if they ask you a question, well, let me ask you a question first. Is that okay? And then go from there. So let's take a few minutes, and the person says to you, you are just filled with hate speech and I am offended. So let's just take the last 3 of these. Work the 3 questions and kind of do a little mini dialogue. You can do it as a table or one-on-one. See if you can come up with something to observe the process, to step out of it. That was you must be really upset with me, am I missing something? Or, well, I don't think that one will work in this one. And then see if you do we need to take a break? So work those things into your lexicon. Okay, so I want you to do that for the next couple of minutes. Okay, any insights from the tables you want to share? Pearls of wisdom, learnings, stumblings.
We have a lot of people here that like to flee, the flight one.
Pouting, withdrawing, right? Yeah. Yep, that's common. Low conflict. Let's keep, no, we don't want conflict.
And that doesn't create a relationship.
True.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's ultimately, I think, what we want.
Right. You do want to get beyond your comfort zone. Dr. Popchak says that the biggest problem in marriages is not finances, sex, or parenting. It's going beyond your comfort zone. That's the biggest problem. Any other?
I just think physiologically sometimes I'll feel like this adrenaline rush to fight. And that sometimes overwhelms me where I'm not calm enough to ask good questions.
Absolutely.
I feel my heart racing, you know what? I'm not even sure I think as clearly then when
Oh, absolutely not. Because your intellect, which is in your first finger, right? But it's offline. So when you're flooded with your feelings, you don't think it's good. And this is, I deal with a lot of homeschooling moms, and it's like the kid's upset and crying, and they're trying to do math. I'm like, no, wait a minute, time out, slow it down, get their brain back online so they can learn. So it's no different with us too. But yeah, you're right. So that's the instance when you need to take a break, when you're jacked up. So, you had something, Bobby?
Yeah, I find myself in that head mode. So I want you to explain a little bit about love without a challenge. So does that mean, when I think of it, is that I love them, so I want them to know the truth, but I'm not giving them anything to think about, to respond to. Is that what you mean by that?
Well, if you're in your head and you're giving them information, you may be in expert mode. So, and they're not interested. So then, they're like, okay, you're not listening. So what you want to see if you can do is go down to the emotions and see if you can kind of, all right, what do you, looks like you're backing away, what's happening? Did I'm trying to do something loving and it looks like it's not working. So come on back and tell me what happened, and go with the emotional side of it. If you can. Now, it takes some emotional intelligence to do that. And if you're jacked up, come on, I'm gonna get the truth in there. It's not gonna happen. So, anything from your table? Doesn't have to be, but.
We just needed to know how to carry around a smaller ball.
Tennis ball. Okay, so let's continue on. Gang violence is a problem all over the world. This particular story takes place in South Africa. It was a gang of juvenile delinquents, and they were on a killing spree. They racked up 39. These were the victims, the rhinoceroses. They were on the endangered species. It was the white rhino. These were the perpetrators. It was a band of juvenile delinquents. What had happened was another preserve was overpopulated. They killed mothers and fathers, took the young ones, transferred them to a new place. When the males turn 13 to 18, they get kicked out of the herd. And they're supposed to go hang out with their spiritual fathers. They attach themselves to an older male. Yes, they were gone, none there. So then what happens is they formed gangs, their testosterone spikes, they go into the must phase, which is basically their heat phase, 10 years early. They became very aggressive, became the neighborhood bullies, which is very unusual for elephants to have cross-species violence. And they would harass the rhinos, throw sticks, stones, water. One even stalked them for like a day. Ultimately, that violence would turn into flipping them over and stepping on them, or they would tip them over and then run their tusks through them. So they would kill them, 39. So this guy was a big bull. He's about a 4-ton bull. They were fatherless. They brought him in, brought a couple in, and of course there was a clash, which ended in one 2-ton testosterone-laden, know-it-all adolescent taking a 3-foot ride in the air, 2 tons, 3 feet, boom, and it was over. Testosterone level went down in an hour. The dominance hierarchy was established, and they grew up to be good citizens. They were fathered. Had spiritual fathers, and they were fathered. Our culture has been called the culture of death. I think it's in part due to fatherlessness. That's a whole nother talk, but we're in trouble. And much of it comes from a series of philosophies that sets itself against nature. The story illustrates that there's an order to things. When you mess with that order, you get what? Disorder. Chaos, right? The cross-species violence wasn't typical. Now, I want to turn to these big philosophical questions. When it comes to same-sex attraction, the battle is not so much about sex as it is about a battle between how to view reality. So it's much bigger than just sex. Are things in the material world ordered to some purpose or not? Okay? So it's not sex, it's a battle about the nature of reality. On one side is you discover reality. It's there, it's objectively there, you discover it, and things have an inbuilt purpose. Reason becomes prime in this view. This is where natural law is. I'm not going to do all the isms on the bottom. On the other side is you make it up. You make up reality. There's nothing until we make it according to our own desire or will. Now, that may sound kind of way out there, but we'll get into some examples here that bring it home pretty quickly. So this is modernism. That's a big term, messy term, but idealism and Marxism comes out of this. So socialism comes out of this make it up side of philosophy. So natural law says that there are certain rights and morals that are inherent in nature. They're endowed by nature. That's traditionally God or some transcendent source. And that these can be understood universally through human reason. Okay? So there's a reality, you go discover it. And there's purpose already inbuilt in nature. This author, E. Michael Jones, says that modernity is the rationalization of sexual behavior. This is really key in looking at our culture. Modernity is the rationalization of sexual behavior. So, how many of you have heard of Karl Marx? And Freud, Sigmund Freud, and Carl Jung? Oh, good. We got there's psychologists. Margaret Mead. She is an anthropologist that went to Samoa and brought back a whole story about it. And then how about Alfred Kinsey? He is the bane of Indiana, right? IU has the Kinsey Institute, and he was a wicked man and spread lies like you wouldn't believe. And then even Martin Luther was in this category. Their intellectual contributions come out of their personal lives, their distorted desires, and their wish fulfillment, rather than apprehending an external reality. So they all have sexual histories that are out of control. And then they come up with an ideology to go along with it. So we've got psychology, we've got Marxism, we've got sociology, anthropology, sexology, and I don't know if I should say this, Protestantism, some of it comes out of that. That's the big picture. You discover reality versus you make it up. So now our modern culture is also very good at breaking things apart. There's a whole series of divorces. So there are things that should be together, they get torn apart. We'll look at a series of them. So all heresies take a piece of the whole, part of the whole, and then make it the whole. So Jesus is God or man? No, it's man, boom, that becomes the whole. Jesus wasn't God. Jesus was God. He wasn't man, he was just an apparition. Those are heresies. So the Catholic Church says, no, these things belong together. Heresies and modernism try to divorce things. So what are these things? In the middle two columns, you've got one color is on these two columns, and then another color is on the other side. So in the middle are the things that belong together. So you've got material and immaterial world. And then you get, I put all the isms up there for you geeks out there. But on the materialism side, it's man alone. There's no God. On the immaterial side, it's the spiritual alone. The physical world's bad. When you get to body and soul, that's divorced. Pleasure alone for the body. You've got soul alone. So that turns into, you've got escape from the body. Sex and marriage are divorced. You get my pleasure alone. No. And then every form of sex is okay. So masturbation, same-sex marriage, sex with anything becomes okay because it's not tied to marriage. On the marriage side, and this is happening more and more, is, it's friendship alone, and we have sexless marriages. Everybody's too tired, they're too busy, So then there's a divorce between the individual and the community. On the community side, it's the group alone. So that's tending toward socialism, and the group becomes more important. Then there's the individual, and then it's myself alone, and this is where our culture is. Well, we're kind of going back and forth. They have different views, but neither of them work because they're divorced. And then freedom, and this is the big one for all of this. But all of these are the foundation for homosexual sex. So freedom becomes my freedom alone. I become free from things. So I should be able to sit down at a piano, even though, and just play it, boom, 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 right? I'm free to do that. I'm free from the rules, the limits of it. Well, good luck with that. Good luck getting an audience anyway. So you have to learn the rules. What music is, the keys, the notes, the melodies, the harmonies, all that stuff, and then you can be free to improvise within that. So freedom always comes from within limits. I live up in Garrett. It's a railroad town. I used to use this one. When is a train most free to be a train? When it's coming down Main Street? I don't think so. It's when it's on the tracks. So freedom is always found in limits. So if you do limits and responsibility alone, then you get into rigidity, and then you get into fundamentalism. And fundamentalism is a big problem in Islam, but also that's when you become, fundamentalism can come from the left. It's when you get a certain set of things, say, well, this is only true. I went to Taylor, and we weren't allowed to smoke, chew, or go with girls who do, right? You pick out your little thing and you make it, smaller. So rigidity and fundamentalism is a problem. So does that make some sense? These divorces that happen in our culture, and then the church is saying, no, it's a wedding feast. It's a wedding in the first chapter of Genesis, or third, and Revelation. It's a wedding feast. God is bringing things all together. He's the great gatherer. So these things belong together, and it's a much more exciting life than these half measures or half pieces. Now, go ahead.
Just a quick question. So over time, have these things sort of been divorced and come back together, divorced and come back?
Well, yeah, I think.
Or are we just all on this path of just divorcing it more and more?
Well, when enough of these get divorced and your culture goes down, it dies. And then you have things like, the Benedictines who save culture because they've saved the rules and the literature and the rituals that form us. So yeah, we're going to go through some, but no, it's gone throughout history. All of these, Gnosticism is, from the New Testament, they're dealing with Gnosticism there. So none of it's new, but it is, there are some new things about homosexuality and the way things are being done right now. So here's a scary thing. This is in the Supreme Court decision, Casey versus Planned Parenthood. It says, at the heart of liberty, freedom, is the right to define one's own concept of existence, of meaning, of the universe, and the mystery of life. Is that all? So which side is that on? Discover reality or make it up? Make it up. And it's hard to believe. I mean, if somebody walked into my office and sat down and told me this, my delusional suspicion index went way up. Like, wow, this person is out of it. Anyway, the message is clear. I get to choose. So you take that out to sex and gender, it makes sense. All right, so I'm telling you those things so you can stay calm, so you can see the patterns. This is the prophetic side. So I didn't layer it in there, but the prophet is out of the head, the truth. You can see the patterns. And if you can see them, you can prepare yourself and not get caught off guard. So I want you to take 60 seconds, one-on-one, or one-on-three, looks like one-on-one, whatever, and just say what stood out for me in that last section. You ready? And you can go. Okay. Any little tidbits you want to share? What stood out for you? This is the audience participation portion of our program tonight.
I like that last chart you had up there. I wish we had a handout of it. I think that was the worst thing. Really, made things a lot clearer, and to me, made it seem much more than just about sex.
Mm-hmm.
The same-sex attraction, much more than just about sex.
Right.
I
Good.
second that too. I really like the chart. I really like how to see things, divorce this from this. You just don't think about that.
Right.
You separate these things, and they're never meant to be separated.
Right. Right. And it changes the whole argument. We'll see that in a minute. I mean, it changes the whole message. You shouldn't do that. No. Things need to be brought together. Somebody else? Go ahead, Jan.
I was going to say that it's scary how the church was asleep or has been asleep when that happened. How much did we protest that?
Yes. Yeah, we've been frogs in the frying pan. It's been heating up for a long time. And I won't get into it tonight, but there are homosexual networks in the church working against us. And so I'm going to leave it at that. All right, so seeing the big picture can help you stay calm, gives you a whole different perspective. If you're on the football field, there's bodies moving everywhere, crashing, stuff, you can't see it. You're up in the press box. Oh yeah, I can see what play. Oh, they're running this play. You can see a whole different thing. So hopefully that helps you stay calm. I'm not going to get to 7 tonight, but I do have 7 pieces of gay propaganda. Now this is where I'd probably be accused of hate speech, but it's not my word. It's this book called After the Ball. This is a scary book for me. The subtitle is How America Will Conquer Its Fear and Hatred of Gays in the 90s. And propaganda, it talks about propaganda. We'll see that in a second. Propaganda always tells a partial truth, and it uses divorces. It separates things. It doesn't tell the whole truth. Now, does anybody know what the literal word diablo or devil means? To scatter, to separate. You could say to divorce. Satan's always working at it. Satan, you know what the name that Satan means? The accuser. So in counseling, Jan's also a counselor, people are always accusing themselves, and then what? They separate. So that's Satan's 1-2 punch. So after the ball, good propaganda is the agenda here. A plan as manipulative as that which our enemies themselves employ. So we're the enemies. And this is one of the divorces in I don't know how deep to go, but there's Marxism sees things as a power struggle. That's their lens. That's their highest good. Everything's a power struggle. So, somebody's up, somebody's down. So they're up now, or they're trying to be up, and they're trying to put us down. Or we're the oppressors, and they're the victims. So gays must launch a large-scale campaign, ... We're talking about propaganda. So the propaganda strategy as a mode of communication that first relies more on the emotional manipulation than on logic. So this is part of where our country is. You can't have a logical argument with a lot of college kids. They don't think. So it's all about emotions. They're all what? Head, heart, or hands? Heart. And it works in the favor of government to have kids with their heads offline. They get to manipulate them more. So here's propaganda. I love this picture. It's information, especially of a biased or misleading nature, used to promote or publicize a particular political cause or point of view. So what are they going after? Well, we already talked about it. They're going after the heart. Here's the 7 pieces of gay propaganda. I'm gay. I'm lesbian. Okay, what kind of a term is that?
Look at me.
Look at me, okay. Zoom out a little bit, but yes, that's true. Is it who uses gays? It's
inward.
Yeah, it's a
That's all they're saying they are.
Ye-
That's how they're defining their whole self.
Right, so they're saying this is the whole, so there's a heresy, right? I'm going to take a piece of the whole and make it the whole. I'm gay, but it's a political term. It's from politics. It's not something that, describes anything but a political activity. I don't know if you remember Father Benedict Rochelle. He started the Franciscans of the Renewal in New Jersey or New York, somewhere out there. He says same-sex attraction is a condition. Gay and lesbian is a decision. So if you want to identify yourself as gay, you make that decision to do it. But you have a condition of same-sex attraction. But you make the political decision to be a gay or lesbian. It's a great little book. I won't go into it much. Makes the point about the divorce. Gay divorces you from personhood. That's the divorce there. So this is why I don't call myself gay. It's part autobiography, part philosophy, and he goes through why he doesn't call himself gay anymore. And that he found freedom in limits, in the faith. So here's the argument on the other side. So they're splitting that apart. They're divorcing that. The devil's scattering it. So what's the Catholic Church's message? It's saying, I'm fighting for you. I'm fighting to hold your personhood together with your sexuality. Have you ever heard that one? That the church is fighting for you to keep your sexuality tied to your personhood. Now, I don't know how many gay radicals would go, wow, that sucks, right? I mean, that's a whole different message. Now, sexuality is important, right? I mean, the church is not down on sexuality at all. It just says it's ordered. Think elephants, okay? There's an order to it. So you are a beloved child. This is the church's teaching. You are a beloved child of God, if you're baptized especially, but you're an unrepeatable gift of infinite value and dignity. But that's found in your personhood, not your sexual acts. So he wants to bring you back into relationship with your own personhood in a deep way, to experience true freedom and infinite love. Yep, sorry, I don't want that. That's a pretty, I don't know, compelling message. That's the good news of the church. Now, we do a crummy job on sales, and the gay activists do a great job on selling that we're in the wrong. And so Jesus wants to bring you back into the Father's heart and let the real party begin of rejoicing, right? The problem is always the same. You need to be loved first so you can respond in love. So that's the message for the same-sex attracted. Look, you need to be loved. You haven't experienced loved enough. And then we call you to celibacy. They had a meeting in 1988. It was a war conference. Okay, they came up with a political agenda for the gay movement. This book is really wild. So they had 7, 8 things on it to evaluate and add, and here's just the last 3. Portray gays as victims, not as the aggressors, or not as the aggressive challengers. Make gays look good, make victimizers look bad. I mean, they would run ads like, here's Hitler, he was against gays. So what does that do? Oh, if you're against gays, then you're like Hitler. Oh yeah, there's one. That's my goal for the day. This was a psychological attack. So you first start with desensitization, and you saturate the culture. Continuous flood of TV, movies, advertising with positive images of gay men and women to soften their initial impact. I mean, it is pretty jarring. I mean, I haven't done TV in a while, and I was reading up on this, and when I come across a picture, I'm like, whoa, I'm having a visceral reaction, like, no, I don't like that. So my saturation level's down, and my gut comes online. So then number 2 is counter conditioning. This is the really evil one. It's called jamming. So if you are going to stand up for, against this, they want to associate that with a negative experience. So this is where the homophobe, the bigot, the hater, all that, you don't see yourself that way. So if you say something and somebody shouts you down, what do? Pouting withdrawing, right? Get out of here, I don't want that. So that's how we got so quiet, Jan. They shut us down. So then there's conversion. So counter conditioning is really bad when you stand up and a bishop or a priest says, stop it. That's hate speech or whatever. So it's within the church. So conversion is this associative conditioning by presenting bigots with pictures of people they admire or members of their own crowd and then associating them with gays. So then that softens the thing. And that's where we are now. So you have a series of dominoes. This was the late 80s. And it said, transform it in the 90s. They did beyond what they could ever dream. I mean, they were dreaming when they said the 90s. But here we are, 2018, and we've gone from not only acceptance of homosexual acts, so it's working here. So these are surveys. Same-sex acts are morally acceptable. 2002, it was at almost 40%. 2015, it's at 63%. This stuff's working. Same-sex marriage should be legalized. 2002 looks like about 35, 34%, and 2015, it's up to 60%. And this was a planned strategy to make this happen. So here's a Catholic example, the Human Rights Campaign. They're creating a world where nobody is forced to choose between who they are. Here's where they say, you have to discover it. I'm gay. And so who they are and whom they love and what they believe. So they're trying to run a marriage sham on that side, bringing together things that don't belong together. And Catholics are becoming the lead in the conversation. James Martin is a priest, and he ended up at the World Youth Day, was that, or World Meeting of Families in Ireland just a few months ago. Which one was it? Youth Day? No, families, right. So he went and spoke about the LGBT community, and he's trying to build a bridge, but the bridge really doesn't connect either side. I don't have time to go into it, but it's not good. It can be a little bit subtle, but it's still very present that he's saying, look, you have to accept the way you are. It's in the church. Propaganda number 2. Same-sex attraction is more prevalent than you think. So I'm going to do a survey says, what percentage of the population do you think is actually same-sex attracted? And if you know the answer, don't shout it out yet.
15%.
15. 10. 8. Okay. Last survey, public perception was 23%. Do you know what the actual is? 1% by the Guttmacher, I don't know if I'm saying it right, Institute. They're the ones that run the abortion stats, okay? Not exactly a liberal or not exactly a conservative organization. They said 1%. This particular survey was Gallup, and they said 3.8%. And there's stuff in between. But it's gay propaganda that they're, and it comes from Kinsey, blasted Indiana. He said he did his studies in prisons. So the rate goes up. He coached people, and he came up with 10%. And that was back in the 50s. Number 3, my genes made me do it, or I was born this way. Okay? Twin studies, you'd have to have close to 100%. You know, if the identical twin has blue eyes and that's the gene, the other one's going to have blue eyes. Now this is with behavior. So twin studies only come in at 11 to 14% correlation. That's not genetic. There's nowhere close. And then, you know, here's the real kicker. Gene studies itself, when it comes to thoughts and behaviors, there's only ever 10% of an influence, not a one-to-one relationship. So it's 10%. It's not genetic. The guy who discovered the gene, you know, got taken out of context. It's propaganda, which takes a little piece of the truth, twists it, and uses it for its own agenda. That's what they've done. And the guys completely said, that's not what my study said.
So only 10% are affected by genes, is that what you're saying?
Yes, yes. Then that's not, and it's affected, it's not a cause, it's an influence. So there is no gay gene. Oh, this one's good. Adolescence. 16 to 17, that age. How many would you say shift from identifying as same-sex attracted to other sex attracted? Percentage. The audience participation program.
In 16 and 17-year-olds?
Yes.
So 3%.
3%. No? Anyone? 10? Keep guessing. Oh, I had it in here. 98%. So a 16-year-old comes to you, says they're same-sex attracted, just hold your breath, okay? Just, it's going to change. It's better than the Indiana weather, right? I mean, 98% are going to change. That's huge. That's not genetics. That's behavior. All right, and so there is no single cause on the social factors, but you lump all the social factors together, you get 76% causal rate or correlation rate. So what happens is we've got a domineering mom, closeness to mom, mother-dominated father, negative relationship with father, passive dad. That's on the family side. Then you got homosexual arousal in childhood and adolescence. You've got peer dynamics, bullying, maybe they get sucked into somebody. Then you've got this gender nonconformity is not feeling like you're in peer group. So maybe you're a tomboy or maybe you're, more effeminate. Then sexual abuse comes into this, homosexual activity in childhood or adolescent, and then there's different paths through these things. So you might go this way. Or, it might be this way. So there's no one single cause, and they've used it, the propaganda is that there isn't a cause, a social cause, so it's genetic, but if you take all these pieces together, you've got a whole package where nurture is a massive influence, a massive problem on same-sex attraction. All right, it's 5 after. I knew I wasn't going to finish. Do you want, I could do one more, I could stop here. Okay, got a couple stoppers. So next week we'll go through some of these and then do same-sex marriage as well. Okay? Great. Thank you.